Hey, friends. Yeah, that was ridiculous, but I don't care. Hey, friends, my name is Scott Hanselman. You can go to my blog and check me out. I've got this really cool new thing that I've been plugging into Chrome. It's actually this new extension you should all get. It's called the Bing New Tab. And what it does is you're in Chrome and you make a new tab and it gives you Bing. But then when you search for stuff, it goes to Google. So you can find things on the internet, which is really cool. I have a blog and I have a podcast. I would really encourage you to check out my podcast. I have crushing imposter syndrome, but I have done 617 episodes of this podcast, and I'm just going to scroll and show you some of the fabulous people that I've had on the show. And I want to point out that I'm still scrolling. This is literally 12 years of content every Thursday for the last 600 and something episodes. And again, still scrolling. You see the awesomeness continues. I would encourage you to check it out. It's at Hansel Minutes. And if you can't remember that, just go to freshairfordevelopers.com and it will redirect you, which is ever so shiny. Cool. All right, let's do a talk. Pop, pop, pop. And boom. All right. Blah, 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 blah. It's fun. Cool. So I do work for Microsoft. I apologize. I work, however, on the forest moon of Endor, which is also known as Portland, Oregon, and I work in open source, which is pretty cool. Now, I've actually been in open source for many, many years, like 20 years, but I've only been at Microsoft for 10 years, and when I went to work at Microsoft, a lot of people said I was a sellout. Like, yeah, you took the big money and you suck, you were one of us, and now you work for the man. And it made me feel really sad, and I didn't know how to deal with that, like emotionally, how I was going to be able to work through those issues. And it was difficult, but somehow I found it to work out. Because a lot of you saw me on TV before Microsoft, but after Microsoft, it's worked out pretty well. And you know, it's a big and complicated company to work at. It's got a very sophisticated org chart that can be very challenging to work through. But you know, we think that we're not as evil as you think we are. But what I want to talk to you about here is about this juxtaposition that I've noticed between the cloud and the browser. I was recently at Intel speaking with a group of people about web development who weren't web developers. But what was so profoundly interesting about talking to these people is that a lot of them had 30 or 40 years in the business. These weren't mainframe programmers. These were early microcode developers, people who invented compilers, people who had been in software as long as I am old. But then afterwards, they would come up and say, I'd really like to become a web developer. So that's really interesting. How would you teach someone with that much historical context how to be a web developer when they had been ignoring the web the entire time? I asked the woman who asked me to be a web developer, how did you not notice the internet happening? And she said, I was busy inventing the compiler. Now, I don't have a picture of some of the people at Intel that asked me these questions, but I do have a picture of my dad taking a selfie, just to give you a sense of the age, the generational difference here, okay? So I said, well, let me think about a way that I can explain how web development and architecture should work today. Let's start with the cloud. What's this concept of the cloud, right? Well, there's this quote, this famous quote from this gentleman named Thomas Watson, and he said that there was a market for maybe 5 computers, and then we would have sold all the computers, right? That'd be it. He thought that there'd be 1 computer per continent. There'd be like the South American computer, and then it'd be like a big refrigerator, and then you would send jobs to it, and then it would do its thing. Now, I don't know if that's a real quote. I couldn't prove that this was a real person, but I do have this really old book. So I'm just going to say that that's the guy. And so this guy says, that there's maybe 5 computers in the world. And it turns out that this has actually happened. It's just that they're not refrigerators, they're clouds, right? There's the Microsoft cloud, there's the Google cloud. I understand that there's a bookstore with a successful cloud that may be doing well. Now, I happen to work on Azure, which I recognize is a little behind, but we're getting color, which is good. And the other thing that's great about Azure is we're building new containers all the time, adding new containers to Azure. And when I said to the person at Intel, what do you think when you see cloud? And they said, well, I mean, I don't know. The cloud is probably what hipsters call hosting, right? You just have a machine somewhere that you can't see, and then you get to call it the cloud. And I thought, well, it's not really quite that easy. It's a little more interesting. I said, let me show you this diagram that we all learned in computer science class. I said, this diagram kind of shows you the characteristics of an operating system. Are you familiar with that? And she said, yeah, I invented it. But like every mediocre white man, I persisted. And I said, well, actually, because if you're going to mansplain, you've got to take it to that next level. Please don't mansplain. So I said, that's great. So you understand exactly how this is working. Those characteristics define an operating system, but what's interesting is when that operating system becomes portable, when I can pick it up and move it around, when that virtual machine really becomes virtual, it doesn't know it's in the cloud, and it can be moved from cloud to cloud. The fact that it's portable is the first thing that makes a cloud interesting. The next thing is the idea of programmaticness or programmaticability. I don't know if that's a word. I just made it up. It's a word now. To be able to programmatically talk to the cloud, to go and pick a virtual machine and say, I like that virtual machine. I want to run Jenkins on Ubuntu, and I'm going to go and type, Azure VM create enter, and then, ASCII art appears, which is more proof that Microsoft's not evil. And I said, how do you here at Intel request a virtual machine in the cloud? And they said, well, we fill out this form, and then I have to fax it to my manager to get it the okay. Like, you're seriously kidding me. Like, no, there's paperwork to get VMs, and then they wait for a couple of weeks in order to get them. That's horrible. That's horrible. The cloud needs to be portable, it needs to be programmatic, it needs to be elastic, and if you have to put a barrier between the developer and the cloud, you've got a problem. Today's cloud has replaced so much knowledge that I used to have. Now, I'm a little bit older, so I have a multi-page resume. You know how everyone says you should only have one-page resume? I'm a rock star. I've got a 3-page resume, right? So then it turns out the entire second page is useless because it's learning to scale a web farm. Right? So I'm working with a young person at work, and they say, hey, you're going to scale this web farm, and they just took a slider bar and went like that. And they were like, oh, this is taking like a minute. Bleh. I was like, I worked through the 90s to scale a web farm. I just pulled page 2 of my resume out and just threw it away because it's just trash right now. Think about how I feel when I see updating a server farm. I literally physically updated server farms before. I would go to like PC Micro Center and buy the machine and rack it and put the memory in and then sleep at the cloud. I would sleep in the data center, and now it just says updating a server farm, which just says your skills are useless, which is fine, and I'm not bitter. What's cool about that, though, is that we're standing on these abstractions, these layers that we don't have to worry about. So what that young people don't know how a server farm works? It doesn't matter. For a lot of people, they're going to pull that slider bar and they're going to go, what just happened? And there's only one answer, magic. And what is so amazing about this GIF, I want to just take a moment to just analyze this GIF. This is the ultimate multi-generational GIF, because for one class of people, this is Shia LaBeouf. For another class of people, that's Doug Henning. Everyone's frantically Googling, who the hell is Doug Henning? And then for another generation, the bridge, like myself, that is Shia LaBeouf doing a Doug Henning impression. Huh? So now both of you, old and young, need to figure out who Shia LaBeouf is, it's not spelled the way you think it is, and who Doug Henning is, who's, I think, dead. Okay. Then the person at Intel says, well, what language should I use? You're Microsoft, you're going to tell me to use C#. And I was like, no, you can use whatever language makes you happy. You can use Java, you can use Node, you can use, well, don't use PHP. You can basically use anything but PHP. It would be, oh, I apologize. I don't mean to language shame. I realize it's not kind to do that, but I think PHP has like 30 million developers. They can take a little ribbing. So he was like, that's amazing. I can use any, yeah. Woo, I can't believe I can do anything. A good cloud is open source. Lets you do whatever. If you can put any code you want, any way that you want onto the cloud, that's a good thing. You want to be living at a different level of abstraction. You don't want to think about going to PC Micro Center and buying computers like I used to. You want to think at an entirely different level. I was at a conference recently with this British guy who was at the time, the chief architect of Netflix. And he was talking about how they scaled their system out, and they were changing things from spinning Rust hard drives, like hard drives you can hear, to SSDs, solid state that you can't hear. And it was talking about the performance ramifications and the cost and stuff. And he kind of looked like John Malkovich, and he had a bow tie, and he was British, so he had like +2 charisma. And he just kind of came out, hello, I'm from Netflix. Oh my God, that was amazing. And he gave this whole talk about the thoughts that a chief cloud architect has. And he basically described this amazing system that they built, but he was talking specifically about IOPS, input operations per second, the number, the index that describes the performance of cloud storage. And it's one of those index numbers, and you say, well, it's $1 for 100 IOPS, but it's $3 for 3,000 IOPS. Okay, that's a no-brainer, right? 30 times more for 3 times the money, awesome. And he explained how it was a cost issue, but it made Netflix more performant. Gave his talk, it was amazing. He was English, loved the English people. And then this Norwegian kid came up who was kind of like, I don't know, one of those hackers that has probably, it's always a Norwegian kid that's hacking into your computer. And he says, well, actually, I can't do Norwegian accent. Actually, sir, it's bad. The mean time before failure. And he basically said, you're an idiot. The mean time before failure of SSDs is too short, and then Netflix is going to crash and burn because SSDs, break a lot because his buddy's laptop died at some point. And this British guy, took that feedback, which was pretty awesome. And then, what do you think about that, sir? That's a problem. That's not my problem. I'm renting them. Oh, that was a freaking genius thing. He's renting the disks. So what if they die? It's the cloud, not his problem, right? Think about the different levels of ownership. You own the car, you rent the car, you Uber the car, right? I'm staying in a hotel. I completely thrashed the hotel room last night. Totally, I was by myself, but I completely thrashed it because I'm a freaking rock star. And I'm going to go back, platform as a service. It's going to be put exactly as before, right? Don't have to worry about it. It's not my problem. I'm renting them. So the young person didn't know they'd been cut. They just stood there. It was like those ninja movies where someone goes, shook, and then the brain cuts and then the slides down, and then the body is just like, and we were like, do we push him over? Do we wait for him to fall? What should we do? Now, I don't have a GIF of that, but I do have a GIF of John Malkovich hitting a grenade with the back of a gun back into the guy that asked the same question. That's effectively what happened at this conference, and it was glorious. Why? It's because this person is thinking at a higher level. All the things that the young man said about SSDs failing, totally valid. Deeply, deeply not Netflix's problem, Amazon's problem. Because this guy's thinking about things in terms of dashboards. He's a CTO. He wants a dashboard that describes things. And if you have a startup or a side hustle or something that you're doing and you want to feel better about yourself, let me just tell you, get a freaking dashboard. They're so awesome. I have a small startup. I sell this product for $3 on iTunes. I just got a cheap monitor from Goodwill, and I mounted it in my living room with a picture of the Earth with just push pins because we're global, right? I work out of Panera, which has offices everywhere globally, which means that it's a global startup, right? So if you have this awesome dashboard on a panel in your house, you feel very, dashboardy. And that's the level of the cloud. I don't want to be SSHing into production. That's not a good feeling, People build these crazy dashboards and they say, yeah, this isn't dashboard enough. And there's always that one old person at work who's like, I've got a dashboard. It's fine. And then you struggle, dude, just upgrade. Okay, fine, I'll upgrade. There is no scenario where HTOP is an appropriate cloud dashboard. We're working at a different layer of abstraction. Hosting means that you can visit your hard drive and put your ear up to it and listen to it. You can go downtown, find the machine in the rack, and hear it, and then hit refresh, and then hear the hard drive. That's hosting. With the cloud, you put one bit out into the thing, you take a single byte and you drop it into the storage, and suddenly it's in 3 locations globally. The cloud allows small businesses to scale in ways it never could before. And what's nice about it is that we are literally standing on the shoulders of giants who have done this work for us, from the processor all the way up. So I don't have to worry about scaling. I just hit a checkbox or pull a slider bar. So when the person at work says, that's a dashboard, you tell them it's freaking wrong. And stop telling me that it's not about Luigi. Mario was not the best Mario brother. It's always been Luigi. And if you try to argue to me that Luigi is not better, you're wrong. Sorry, it's Luigi. Sorry, I got a little off topic there for a second. Point is, there's certain things you can't argue about, and Luigi is better, and that's all I'm trying to say. So the cloud offers elasticity, a programmatic ability, and a flexibility that we just don't see in hosting. That sense of ownership is nice, but I really don't feel like I want to be shushing into production. That's what I'm calling it, by the way. I'm really hoping that that can be a thing, if you would help me. I want you to just casually at work, just throw it into I shushed into production. And just do it, just throw it away. Like, don't even stop. And then I just want the people to go like that, like, oh, is that how it's been pronounced all these years? And I want to just slowly and quietly convince the entire industry that it's shushing, not SSH, but shushing into production. And then if you are standing in front of anyone, if you can do like a little jeté when you shush into production, that would really help me out. So let's transfer our context now to the browser. The cloud is elastic, the cloud is open source, the cloud lets you do anything. But what does the browser let you do? Remember this. That's that diagram that describes the characteristics of an operating system. What is an operating system? It has memory management, it has storage, it has networking. If you have all of those things as well as some amount of isolation, then you probably have an operating system. Now, back in the day, you would sit down at a computer that looked like this, and you would start typing, but the real work was happening on a refrigerator that lived somewhere else. And that refrigerator would show you a UI. It would bring this UI up, and that UI would then appear on the other machine. That's a dumb terminal. Isn't it funny that the pocket supercomputer that I'm using now to argue about people and look at pictures of cats has more power than that dumb terminal, but still doing dumb terminal stuff? It's still waiting for strings from giant refrigerators, which is kind of suboptimal if you think how powerful it is. And we heard about that when Dr. Kaku mentioned that this morning. Now, when Tim Berners-Lee and friends came up with the internet, and that's the first page of the web, that is literally the first web page. It's still at the same URL too. In fact, there used to be a computer under his desk with a note on it that said, "Don't kick this, it's the internet." And if you accidentally pull your chair back too far and kick the internet, the whole internet would go down because it was just that one thing. And when he made this, though, he wasn't thinking about an application platform. He wasn't trying to redo mainframes or make a new way to write apps. He just wanted to make a cool way to talk about things. He wanted a big, infinite book. He's very modest. I've picked up a number of business cards from very nice people here at the conference, and you all have some pretty fancy titles, I must say. A lot of people with a lot of commas at the end of their name. You know, Scott Hanselman, comma, took the Angular boot camp, comma, da-da-da-da. Do you ever notice that Tim Berners-Lee could have said the? Could have said junior, could have said senior. I say senior. I can't say senior anymore because Berners-Lee is just web developer. So now I have to become junior web developer until he dies, basically. If he had said the web developer, then at that point we would know that he was an egotistical maniac. But when he invented the web, he wasn't thinking about the kind of things that we have to think about now. How could he have guessed that when developing the web, things like PDF would be created to deal with limitations in the web. Remember early on, we would make a page and we'd go, yeah, it's not nice enough. I need pixel perfect typography. I need it to, oh, we need a PDF then. Oh, okay. And then what do you know? PDF goes along, becomes the 5th most popular religion in the world. He never could have known those things. Could never have guessed. So we're surfing the web, we're doing our thing, we're looking at pages, and then this happens. We all remember the very first time we hit a page with a Java applet on it, because you're surfing, you're like, and then Java loads. Which is cool, because then these guys are like, we can do it too, whee, right? And then these ones are like, we've got YouTube, we still matter for something. But why were we trying to do this? Java, Silverlight, Flash, historical context, why? Because we desperately wanted that. We wanted a browser with a tiny virtual machine, with a plug-in virtual machine. We wanted a little portable computer. I recently went to Toyota to get my car looked at. And as I hope you all do as developers, when you come up to a kiosk where someone's typing on a computer, hey, what kind of system are you running there, right? And then the next thing you know, you're on the other side and you're putting yourself in first class, right? When I go to Toyota, I usually see that they have some AS400 telnet weirdo system, some dumb terminal that talks to a back-end system. And then I recently went there and they had a brand new shiny Dell computer. And I was like, wow, this is great. And they know I'm a geek. Tell me all about your system. Oh yeah, it's cool, you can log in and terminal and everything, and I can run. He runs Windows XP, and I was like, do I say anything? So I didn't say anything, and then he loads up Firefox, and then he opens a Java jar file off the desktop, which is itself a Telnet emulator, and Telnet's back to the same AS400. Then looks me in the eye and says, "This is way better than before." Why are we doing this to our users? This is not okay. We're making these ridiculous little islands of interactivity on a larger web page. That's not what we want to do. And then all the while, of course, this is happening quietly. JavaScript's sneaking up on you. Only thing people are doing in JavaScript is making alert boxes and naming their kids little Bobby Tables to see if they can have an alert box pop up and go, pwned. And don't do this. Java people hate that. Totally not related. First thing, welcome to Computer Science 101. Before we start, Java, JavaScript, not the same thing. But no, we don't know why. Because it's fun to say Java. That's all we know. Right? Oh, now it's ES6? Yeah, that'll catch on. Here's a diagram of what it's like to work in JavaScript. It's a simplified flowchart, but just to give you a sense of, as a developer, what it feels like. What? JavaScript. So things are happening in JavaScript. People are building emulators. People are building new computers and new systems that they couldn't build before. And then your boss comes along and says, hey, what if does this work without JavaScript? No, it doesn't freaking work without JavaScript. No, if you disable JavaScript, you will die. The great cookie scare of the early 2000s is over. The app will not work. We progressively whatever until JavaScript is off, and then it says, no, you're idiot, turn on JavaScript. You can do amazing stuff with JavaScript. JavaScript's becoming the internet itself. This was an example of a video game that was the #1 iPad game. They converted it to HTML5 and JavaScript, and it worked. It was pixel perfect. You could not tell it wasn't JavaScript. You've seen examples where people have run things like Doom and Quake and used with like WebVR, and they've used things like Clang to take C++ code and compile it all the way down to WebGL. Now at this point, in a talk like this, the obvious next step is that I run Quake in the browser as a demo. No. I'm not going to do it because it's derivative. I think it's stupid, and I think there's too much cool stuff going on in the JavaScript space right now, and I think that it's way cooler to talk about things like WebVR. And though we've been talking about virtual machines, which is kind of a problem, and I did a lot of this work in my mom's basement, so what if we brought up a Windows 3.1 emulator in a WebVR environment of my parents' basement? And then within that ran Trumpet Windsock, and then ran the web browser. Notice the Fritos, the Jolt Cola. I cannot take credit for that, but it's amazing. There's Netscape Navigator. So the next time your boss says, is JavaScript really ready to go? Is this the time? It might be too early. You could maybe consider showing them. This is actually so amazing it can't be stopped. That is the power of JavaScript, people. I was getting ready to like kill -9, and I was like, I don't know how to make it stop. So if you take the original diagram and overlay the characteristics of JavaScript with the characteristics of an operating system, the things JavaScript can do, like garbage collection and web workers and all the cool APIs and Sandbox, a tiny freaking SQL Server database that's built into JavaScript, JavaScript's an operating system. It's like an extra one. It's a virtual machine that comes along. And then if you apply Atwood's law, any application that can be written in JavaScript will eventually be written in JavaScript. And to take that even farther, it also applies to Microsoft Excel, because really anything at all can be written in Microsoft Excel. And I want to make sure that we never forget the time that Kelly Rowland texted Nelly from Microsoft Excel. Never forget, people. Never forget. So you have another operating system. You have another one inside of your web browser on your mobile device. We fight about Android versus iOS, but we've seen with things like NativeScript, with smart Angular development, you can make an app that works just fine. It looks native and it runs in your mobile device in that other mysterious secret operating system called JavaScript. Now, I've been saying JavaScript, but really what do I mean? I probably mean HTML5 and CSS3 and all that other stuff that all goes together. But it's really confusing, especially for new people, to explain what exactly is HTML5. No one can explain it. Well, it's kind of an amalgamation of various versions of standards. I've put together a very simple litmus test for you to understand as a new person to JavaScript what is HTML and what is HTML5. So how do you tell HTML from HTML5? You try it in Internet Explorer, and if it didn't work, it's HTML5. It's kind of just a basic standard way of knowing. Because, see, there was a time when HTML tables were the most advanced technology of all times. Now, earlier we had a multiple PhD and postdoctorate person talking about all the new AI. I don't know. I went to community college. ML, all the kind of stuff. But I got my first job when someone came up to me on the street and said, "Do you know HTML tables?" I do. Boom! I got a job. That's how easy it was. Do you know Rospan? Senior engineer. Yeah. So I figured that would work for my career. I would just be like view sourcing my way to glory. I'd be like CTO by now, right? So I go and see amazing stuff that you all are working on, and I go view source, and I go, it's a div. Like, you look at something like Gmail or whatever, and you go view source, a single div, and then an include, super whatever .min.js. That's a challenge. HTML is just a structure now. CSS is doing the color and the style. CSS is some of the magic. And CSS is so amazing and expressive that you can immediately get exactly what you want without even thinking about it. It's just intuitive. It's powerful. It's easy to control. It's such a fun technology. Now, we were doing some giveaways earlier. They were doing some giveaways, and I've brought some mugs for everyone. Now, they're not quite there yet. I did talk to a couple of folks here that knew CSS better than me. As you can see, it's in a beta form right now. And one of the young ladies at my lunch table came up with this solution, which I think it moves the ball forward, but doesn't quite get the mug. But when I get the mugs done, I will get those out to you. But right now, JavaScript is everything else, right? Here's an early video of my childhood at the time when I very first learned JavaScript. Right? It's that moment when you're just like, well, screw it. Maybe undefined is a function. I have no idea what's going on. Right? JavaScript is getting so crazy right now, it's like, do I learn the bad parts? John Resig has this amazing book called Secrets of a JavaScript Ninja, and I said, that's a great freaking book. Why is there a samurai on the front? Hey, John Resig, what's going on? Ninja, samurai. And he says, oh, don't worry, JavaScript is loosely typed. Yeah, I apologize for that joke right now. Sorry. Someone once said JavaScript is the assembly language of the web, one of our great philosophers. Remember who said that? Me. This is something I said years and years and years ago, and it turned into a whole thing, and people argued about it on Reddit. And then I said, this is BS. I'm going to go to Brendan Eich, and I'm going to freaking ask him what he thinks, because he invented it. And I said, hey, Brent, that is Brendan Fraser from The Mummy. That is Brendan Eich. But Brendan Fraser's a beautiful man, so let's look at Brendan Fraser for a second. Brendan Fraser says that it is kind of the 80-86 of the web, and it's happening. WebAssembly is happening, and it's a joint effort. So I would really encourage us all to think about these wonderful layers that we've built, but also be sure that you don't let the layers hide too much complexity. Should you learn Angular or should you learn JavaScript? Well, you should kind of learn both because one sits on top of the other. Well, I'll just learn jQuery. It'll be fine. Yeah, because I can do jQuery is easy. I love jQuery. Boom. Just be careful, right? Because no one writes jQuery anymore, right? You know who said that? It's jQuery. Just said that, actually. Next time someone at your work says, well, we'll just use jQuery, you say, I don't know if he's available. He's got a really busy IMDb page, and there's a lot going on with jQuery right now, and I'm not sure if we can do it. Like, I know we have this image in our mind about what we're going to build, but it never really kind of turns out the way that I want it to turn out, and I don't really know whose fault it is. So maybe let's not use jQuery. We should maybe consider using vanilla.js. I don't know. In conclusion, I appreciate you all. You're wonderful. What a great conference. Please expect a lot more from your web tools, but experience this fact that the internet is working really well right now. And the cloud gives you this unlimited scale, but don't forget that your browser has a virtual machine in it that is deceptively powerful. You've got accelerated 3D graphics and this whole integrated VM. Make sure that both the cloud and the local machines are working hard, because maybe your cloud doesn't need to. So you know this stuff, my friends. That's what I told my person at Intel. You know this already. You know the cloud. You can program the browser. You are powerful. Thank you very much.